and we are recording this, FYI, just a full disclosure. Welcome, everybody, to the first book club of 2019. We're very excited. We're rolling into year 2 consistently. I did it, many, many years ago, but last year we did, I think, 11 books. I gave up on one halfway through. I couldn't finish it, which was, humorous. And then this year we've already got, I think, the first 4 or 5 set. So I have as my guest today Brian Finnegan, and Brian is the EVP at Brixmor Properties. And I'm sure everyone on the call, Brian, pretty much 95% of everyone on the call is in retail. I would say mostly leasing, but we have some investment sale people, some mortgage people, and everyone once in a while will have an outlier of, another part of the business. And Brian and I met in 2016, and we've been friends ever since. And at the New York ICSC, I said to Brian, let's just chat. Let me come by and say hi. And he pulls out of his briefcase this book, The Obstacle is the Way. And he said, I really like this. You should read this. And I said, awesome. And I did. I think I kind of pretty much read it on the plane ride home, most of it. And I enjoyed it. And I thought it would be a good book to start our new year. So I invited Brian. Brian's got a meeting at noon, so we're gonna chat with Brian about why he liked the book, why he wanted to share it with me. He knows who our audience is. But before I do that, Brian, what I would like to ask you, is reading a hobby for you, or is it a hit or miss thing?
It's become a hobby for me. When I moved back to, and thanks for having me. When I moved back to the East Coast, I tried to set a goal in 2015. I set a goal of 12 books. I wanted to do a book a month. And then last year, I wanted to get to 20 books. And this year, I wanted to do 2 a month. So I read roughly 2 books a month. I try to mix it up between business books, between not a ton of fiction. I don't read a ton of fiction, but I really focus a lot on biographies of successful people, historical figures. One of the reasons that I thought to bring this book to Beth was because of this book club. Frankly, I haven't been able to be on the calls, but Beth was kind enough last year to send me Danny Meyer's Setting the Table. And I actually bought that book for all my managers, as well as my CEO for the end of the year, because it just had such a profound impact on the way to serve the customer, and you can see why he's so successful. And so when Beth had sent the meeting out, and knowing that the love of books that she has and that you all have, I wanted to make sure that this one, which has had an impact on my life, was something that I thought would be beneficial.
Okay, so share why it's had an impact on your life, if you will, please.
Sure. So I think to do that, how I found it would be the circumstances around how it came to me would be important. So for those of you that know Brixmor, we own roughly 440 some odd shopping centers across the U.S., fairly in 32 states, I believe, as of our last quarterly filing. And in 2016, there was an unfortunate event at the company that led to the dismissal of our CEO, our CFO, our Chief Accounting Officer, and another employee who was a close friend of mine. So imagine you're there on a Sunday, you walk in, your boss is gone, your boss for 7 years is out, as well as a number of people that you're really close with on the executive team. And there's some things that can happen during that time. You start to think about, well, maybe they were wrong for how they were treated, or all this stuff you can be angry about. And I decided at the time that I just said, look, I'm going to put my head down and go to work. And I work with a coach here, and he had recommended this book to me because there was certainly, if you just use the title, there was an obstacle here. We had somebody who was with the company, our prior CEO was with the company for over 20 years and had been a mentor to me and to many people in the industry, was really the only reason for, not the only, I shouldn't say, but was a big reason for the success. And there was a lot of questions out there regarding our broader team in terms of we can continue the success that the company had previously had. So when I got the book, I, like Beth, dove into it and read it really quickly. And what I really liked about it first was that it was timeless. The fact that the principles that Ryan was talking about in the book were written thousands of years ago and could be applied today.
170, right? 170.
Yeah, 170. And could be applied today. It's just eye-opening as I was reading the pages, and then went on to read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, or actually had referred to it. I hadn't really remembered it or didn't read it with as much focus when I was in high school. But I thought that was the first piece. The other piece that was important to me is that a lot of the principles that he talked about could be applied to your job, could be applied to sports, could be applied to your personal life. And the biggest thing for me was he goes into three things. For those of you that have read the book, he goes into three things in there: perception, action, and will, relating to obstacles that we face in life. And the biggest kind of overall takeaway from me, and it's in a number of different books, is recognizing what's in your control and what's not, and focusing on the things that are in your control to be able to make an impact on some of the things that aren't. So the thing about perception to me was really key in terms of how you perceive an obstacle, right? If you perceive an obstacle just that it's unfair, or that you throw your hands up, the woe is me, you get frustrated, well, guess what? That obstacle is going to remain. You're not going to think about how you can necessarily overcome it. He uses a quote in the book from Ben Franklin that says, "The things that hurt us actually instruct us." And if you're able to take some obstacles and look and perceive them in a different way, as an opportunity for growth, or to attack a goal or something in a different manner, it's important. And perception throughout the book, I think, is an important way in terms of how we view not just the obstacles in front of us, but just the world. The other thing related to action that he talks about in the book was really the creativity in how you go about attacking the problem. Your perception leads to, hey, if there's a problem that's there, rather than just being resigned to failure or to not being able to get through it, how can I think about and get creative and ultimately be able to achieve what I want to despite what's in front of us? The example that happened with me was, I was able to develop relationships with a lot of key tenants that, I had known through Mike and I had met previously, but because that opened the window and someone had to step in to do that, I was able to do that. And what that allowed me to do was to create and develop really good relationships in a time of challenges for us as a company. And then the last piece that he talks about is will in the book, and the focus to keep pressing on, knowing that there's things you can't control. I mean, he goes into philosophies about, look, everybody's going to die, and things like that, and recognizing that there is stuff in your life that is out of your control, but to continue to press on and have perseverance was important. And so when I read this, it's usually my gift. It's usually what I do for our team at the end of the year is I'll give a book out that had an impact. I send it to all our guys and guys and girls. But what the feedback that I got was great in terms of the different ways in their life that it was impacting them. So I really found it throughout in my personal life of having perspective. is I think the most important thing that I took out of this, that things are not really always as bad as they seem, and that generally what can seem like an obstacle or a challenge can really be an opportunity for you to grow, can be an opportunity for you to not just what you achieve to set out to do, but to do it in a different way that could be more rewarding.
Absolutely, and I think also, speaking from an observer during that difficult time for you, and this is a question, but I'm assuming and guessing that your management style or your relationship with your direct reports and others who were not your direct reports but then maybe became your direct reports, right, gave you opportunities to further your management style and expertise and grow in that area as well, right?
Absolutely. The way, just getting back to what I said at the beginning, the way that I approached this was, look, there's a lot of people here that just want to work hard, that this shouldn't impact what they do on a day in and day out basis. So how can we continue to give them the support that they can not only continue to do their jobs well, but also we do more and everyone. I think throughout the organization, you saw people step up. So it did allow for people to kind of show off the talent that they had. Because in periods, I think throughout the world, there's periods of disruption. Ultimately, people have the opportunity to step up.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you were breaking up there a little bit, just FYI. I don't know if you were
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I know you're going to have to drop off in about, 10 minutes, so you obviously know the world of leasing agents very well. Mm-hmm. And how do you think that they should take the messages in this book and give them some practical advice, or maybe you already have with your team, because that's my goal, right? My goal is when everyone gets off this call, they can take something. I always say, if you learn one thing from a book, right, one thing, and that you employ it, then it was worth it, right? So. Yeah. So give us your. I wrote
a couple things down and some reminders that I actually had sent out to the team or talked to some members of the team about a couple years ago. And frankly, doing this, I'm grateful to you because it'll allow me to reinforce it. So the thing about perception, first from a leasing rep's perspective, if you perceive you got a tough center to lease, you're going to have a tough center to lease. And if you perceive that a tenant's never going to go there, guess what? They're never going to go there, right? And I have
Brian, you can't ever say no for the prospect, right?
You see, you plugged right there. I actually have a button on my desk, a gift from a friend for Christmas from a new book, that my team is laughing when they hear it down the hallway. But I have it right next to my phone that Beth sent me, and it's exactly right. So if you perceive when we're faced, and when I was a broker, a leasing rep, where I sit today, look, your circumstances surrounding your asset are always going to be different, and it's up to you to create what that reality can be. But if you go into it with the mindset that, oh man, this is tough, or I don't have the capital for this, or the owner's really tough that I have to represent on this one, then that's going to be the reality. Right. Whereas if you approach the center as if, look, with the circumstances that I have here, how could I create the best result for this piece of real estate? I think it's something to think about, and it's really key in terms of perception. And it's the same thing in a meeting with a tenant, right? There may be you don't always know the reasons why it might be a good opportunity or a hole for them if all you're thinking of, well, it doesn't check all these boxes, right? But going into whatever meeting or discussion with a prospect, highlighting your pitch and highlighting all the reasons you think it's a tremendous opportunity, and getting the negative stuff out of the way that you can't control, I think is important. I think from an action standpoint, one of the things is, so now that you perceived kind of what can be, how you're going to make it happen. So you were able to get a tenant to a site maybe that you never thought you were going to get them there. So that's great. Are you just going to show up to the meeting, or are you going to spend the weekend highlighting every single reason that they should be there, right? Are you going to go through and not just map their existing locations, but be able to talk to them about why this is a whole, how the market shops differently, how they can change their strategy if they reload to this site and consider something that they might not have, and frankly put the work in that not everybody always does. So it's really once you get to the fact of something can be different and you don't worry about the stuff you can't control, figuring out from an action plan standpoint what you can do to make that happen, and then from a will perspective, to continue when fate intervenes. And there's another book called by Carol Dweck called Mindset, and it talks about the growth mindset, and to be able to persist when you ultimately are rejected, or to take a positive, or to take an interaction and be able to utilize that in the future. Beth, I don't know if I remember you telling me a story one time, and I don't know the exact circumstances of it, but you had met somebody at an ICSC, and they had talked about something that they liked, and you found an article of it. A watch collector, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you found an article about it, and you pulled it out and just on a flight home, pulled that article out of the magazine you were writing, and put it in a thank you card. And that action, when you needed a consent from that tenant, 2 years later, you didn't even know you needed it at the time.
And
you were able to follow. You don't even know you knew him. Right. You were able to follow up with him, and he recognized that.
I was representing LA Fitness, and I was the tenant rep broker, and it was for a Weingarten center, and Weingarten said, there's no way, this is early with gyms, no landlord wanted gyms, this is like 1995, and they had to get 4 or 5 waivers, and I said, well, I'll go get the waivers. And Weingarten said, well, why would we let you do that? You're the tenant rep broker. And I'm like, well, because I think I can, because I have the optimistic attitude, and I think I can pull it off. And I got Publix, TJ Maxx, Circuit City, and the last one was Office Depot. And I'm like, oh, well, this might be my holdup. I don't know anyone there. And I went to my CRM, typed in Office Depot, Ron Ricks shows up, and I had a note that I had sent him the watch collecting picture of the little piece of furniture that I had pulled out of the Sky Mall magazine. And I called him, and he goes, of course I'll give you the waiver. And like for no money, 0 money, 4 waivers on behalf of Weingarten so I could get my LA Fitness deal done.
Yeah, and I think that to me, as I was thinking about this, is a perfect example of just how you approach your interactions with people, and how little things like that from a fate perspective can come around to benefit you later in life. And conversely, where your interactions with people on a negative perspective, understanding what that'll mean down the line as well. And so that's some of the ways, I think, from a leasing perspective that I think about how the book could be helpful. The one example in the book that the kind of, if you say you learn one thing from a book, he talks about Thomas Edison late in his career. His building, his office, the building where his office was, burned down, and it had all of his research, everything. And someone had come up to him when he was standing outside the building saying, "This must be so awful. This is terrible. All your work, everything you did, it's gone." And he turned around and said, well, at least we weren't in the building.
Yeah,
and
that was a great story.
Yeah, and isn't this a wonderful fire we can see? And what he did was, after the fact, he was able to regroup, came back, made upwards of $10 million a year. They made $10 million for that time, which was still an incredible amount of money. But if you think about that, he did that the following year. His perspective, right? The perspective of the person that came up to him said it was so awful, it was terrible. All she was thinking about was what the work that he had lost, whereas he's saying, well, I'm still here, not in the building.
Right.
So
yeah. One of the quotes in the book that I like is he says, there's the, you say this happened, right? The fire happened. That's the objective piece of it. And then the subjective is how you are going to now look at that. And your subjective comment about the act that actually happened, you have the woman, which, oh my gosh, this is so terrible, and then he's like, well, at least we weren't in it. And he talks about the observing eye. The observing eye is clear of distraction because you're observing an event. And then you have the perceiving eye. And the perceiving eye is where all this emotional negativity comes in. And when you have that emotional negativity, you don't have the clear view to come up with something creative to move through it and get to the other side.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So before I let you go, because I know you need to run, you had mentioned in my email you're going to try to get him, Ryan Holiday, to your Big Brain event. So first of all, did you get him? And second of all, what is your Big Brain event?
We didn't get him yet. So what we do here at Brixmor, and I'm very thankful to our CEO Jim Taylor and our Chief Talent Officer Carolyn Singh. When we rolled out a new benefits package about a year and a half ago, we came up with these Big Brain Day events, which will typically have a book. We had Gretchen Rubin, The Happiness Project. We had Rejection Proof by Ji Jiang, which he came in and spoke to us. What we'll typically do is have the book either the day of or a week or two before, and then the speaker will come in, and we have a meeting typically in our New York, either in the New York area or one of our regional offices, and every region will call in on a video conference and be able to hear from that speaker, talk to them about the book, and ask questions too. And it's been great. And it's something that most of the organization gets into. We probably have, it's not mandatory, and we probably have 95% participation rate across the country.
That's fabulous. Do you read on, when you said I upped my reading when I moved back east, is that because you do the train commute?
No, it's just, I was reading sporadically, and I just wanted to make it more of a habit. And to do that, I had to set a goal around it. So when I set a goal around it it was going to be one a month, and believe me, like the end of this year, I was only at 21 books at first week of December. So I plowed through 4 books at the end of the year, because once I got to 24, I was like,
competitive, Brian, are you?
No. Once I got to 24, I'm like, well, wait a second. 25 sounds like a much cooler number. So, but
and do you read hard copies, or do you
hard
do
copies?
Kindles?
I do hard copies. I'm not a big Kindle. I mean, I have some books on my iPad, but I have usually a hard copy. I'm lugging a big one around right now. I'm reading Team of Rivals from about Abraham Lincoln, which was the basis for the Lincoln movie. So
cool.
I'll have a report back to you on that. It's a little long. It's up there for me. It's like 750 pages. So I'm usually in the 300 range, but it's good so far. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Thanks so much for giving us your time. Everyone else, stay on the call. We'd love to have you back, Brian, so keep us posted as to what books. We've got a few coming up. Obviously, there's this new one coming up next month, don't say no for the prospect. But then after that, we have Atomic Habits. We have there's one before Atomic Habits that I'm missing the name. Who remembers the name? Anyone on the call? But we'd love to have you back and watch for the books. And thank you for your time. And I hope you have a great meeting. And everyone else, stay on.
Thank you very much, and appreciate the recommendations, and appreciate the time, and hope everybody gets a lot out of this book as I have. All right, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. All righty. So anyone on the call have any comments or questions before or if you read the book, any other feedback that you got or things you learned before I start talking about some of the other things that I caught when I was reading it?
The biggest thing that I got out of it is simply he comes from, Holiday comes from this Stoic philosophy.
Right.
He's a big proponent of it. And so what I find of it is it really changed my perception of what Stoic thinking was. As, you have these imageries of a Stoic, and they're just like completely unemotional people that just don't, they just don't have any emotion whatsoever. And that's not what a Stoic is. He's just looking at it from a different perspective and kind of taking emotion out of a problem. And so the way I look at this is I can take this book and I can kind of tie it to Never Split the Difference, and then a couple other ones is, when you put emotion into a problem, it really can cloud your judgment. And so taking the emotion away makes everything a lot clearer, and you can approach a problem, and you can approach, really whatever goal that you're trying to obtain in a much clearer, direct, and more focused way. That was probably the biggest thing that I got out of it.
Yeah, and he says things like apply resourcefulness versus anger, right? Shelf the anger because that's going to do nothing to help. So try to check the emotion. It says defeat emotions with logic. Emoting is the opposite of dealing with. So, and he does say in the book, I get it. Something happens and you're upset. Take 5 minutes, but then steal up and say, okay, how am I going to resolve this? And that the world is full of people whining and complaining and not moving forward. That whining and complaining gets you stuck in the same place, and you don't do anything to move forward to solve the problem. Right? He says, ask yourself a question. Do I need to freak out about this?
Yeah.
And, 99.9% of the time, almost 100% of the time is no, right? What Brian talked about was he does talk about death near the end of the book, and he says, that sometimes thinking that we're mortal, can inspire and motivate you, right? So I'm looking for my quote on that I wrote down. Bear with me. But I thought that was, that's what, Gary Vaynerchuk, you guys know I love him, and he says all the time, people say to him things like, does anything ever get you down? And he says, sometimes I get myself in a headspace where, what if something happened to, someone in my inner circle? And that he says it just propels him to an unbelievable level of gratefulness and gratitude. And I think that's so true. I mean, we all have so much to be grateful for and have gratitude about. He tells a story in the book about this guy Carter. I think he was a fighter, and he ended up having to go to prison for 19 years unjustly. And he said, you can take everything away from me, but you won't take my choices. And even though I might not have power, I'm not powerless. And, again, so many of us, and he says, you might have a bad employer or you may have a bad job, but you still have choices and you still have, you're not powerless. And there are things you can do in every situation to be, move forward and be more positive and handle the obstacle and use it. The guy, Carter, who was in jail, 19 years, I think, they said he got a college degree and he worked on his, legal case, and he used the jail as a schoolhouse. I mean, that's pretty, and he talks about Mandela and other people that were unjustly serving prison sentences who did things, positively in that awful, awful situation. Other thoughts? Dina, are you still on?
Yeah.
You're a very positive, optimistic person. Are you always that way, or do sometimes obstacles get you down?
I mean, I'm definitely human, but I have learned through, experience and kind of seeing other people allowing obstacles to stop them in their way that, the power of positivity is real. And, perspective is important in all situations, especially, in life and work and everything. And if there's something that I can bring to the table that is uniquely my own, it's definitely a more glass half full perspective. And I've seen it, work for me both personally and professionally. If you're showing up to a meeting and expecting the worst, then you'll probably get that. But if you show up and bring a positive, perspective and persona, it seems to be that last little step that's necessary to get whatever I need to get done.
Right. The author says the only guarantee is that something will go wrong. That's the only guarantee in life, that something will for sure go wrong. So the only variable is how we control ourselves. And he says that the collapse of will is worse than anything. To be steely with your will so that you can be resourceful to find a different way. There's always a counter move. There's always a way through it. I thought when I read that, I thought about my dad when I was learning to drive as a teenager. And, when I was going back and forth to Florida State, still as a young driver. And he used to say to me all the time, if you get stuck driving in a pouring rainstorm, never, ever, ever pull over. Always keep driving, and you will drive yourself through it. And that is a metaphor, I think, for these things in this book, to, just keep going. You will get to the other side. And you will become creative. I mean, I don't know if there's any tenant rep brokers on the call, but tenant repping that LA Fitness deal and going to Weingarten and saying, can I do my LA Fitness? No, we have to go get 4 waivers. And then say, well, and then I said, okay. I hung up the phone. I called my client, and then I thought, I know Publix, I know TJ Maxx, I know Circuit City. Maybe they'll let me do it. And, just figuring out a way around it. Another deal, one of my first deals that my partners and I bought was a lot, a 1.5-acre lot, and we had Walgreens. It was off corner. We had Walgreens that wanted to land lease it, but we had a Publix exclusive. And I called, and I called, and I called, and I called, and I kept calling Publix, kept calling Publix, kept calling Publix, kept calling Publix, and the answer was no. And then one day, the definition of insanity, this isn't working. I need to do something else. And one day I called up Publix. I said, well, I just thought, what can I throw out that would just be crazy? I said, well, would you do it for $1 million? Because I figured once I set the price, I could work. If it's about money, then we know it. When we know what the answer is, we just have to negotiate. And the guy paused and said, yeah, we'd probably do it for $1 million. So just moving forward. Another situation I had was I was leasing a property that had lost 100,000 square feet of tenants, and I got hired to lease it. And it was like, everyone in the market hated the property because, of course, it was the property's fault, not the fact that the prior developer gave everyone a year free rent, no guarantees, and when the free rent and full build out. So when the free rent burned off, the rents went from, $0 to $40. That wasn't the reason why everyone moved out, but, it was the property. So for 6 months, literally cold calling and canvassing 100 people a day, could not lease, a square foot. And then I had this one group from Miami that had 7 locations. They wanted to move up to Broward, but they wanted my best location in the center. And they would take 8,000 square feet, which is a huge deal, right? In a center that lost, it's a 400,000 square foot center. We just lost 100,000 square feet. For 6 months, I've done everything I can. I cannot lease something. This 7-chain sporting goods store says I'll take 8,000 square feet, but I have to take the best space, and I only want to pay single digits. And, there's like, no way, we can't do it. No way, we can't do it. We can't give you the best space for single digits. We'll give you single digits in the crappy space, but not the best space, not the only space that has exposure to the street. And then one day I called the client, which was General Electric. I said, look, I said to the sporting goods, why do you want my best space? And they go, well, we're new to Broward, we're new to Fort Lauderdale, we need to establish a presence. I said, well, how long will it take you to establish a presence? Probably about 2 years. I call up General Electric and I said, hey, why don't we would you agree to give them the good space, and then in 2 years, at the cheapy rent, $8 a square foot, and in 2 years, we have the right to recapture and relocate them. So recapture the A-plus space and relocate them to a more destination space in the center. GE, or they have to pay a real rent. GE said yes, they would do it. I went to the tenant, and the tenant said yes, they would do it, and we did the deal. And that deal started, a groundswell of other people that would lease there to help turn around the center. But being creative and trying to work around, does anyone have a situation now where there's an obstacle that maybe we can brainstorm? You've got a lot of people on this call. Maybe some people can give you some ideas of how to brainstorm if you think you're stuck on a deal. Nobody?
Hey, Beth, it's Adam Lipkin. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Long time no see.
I'm doing great. Yeah, right. I'll just share this. It's not necessarily in the retail side, but in the financing side, and I'll share what I'm doing with it, but I'd love to hear anybody's feedback. So I have one of these new financial products that's very exciting, but yet there's a big restriction. The big restriction is to be able to get access to this money, you have to have a senior lender that's willing to allow it in a deal. So it's, very similar to, you've heard these things with EB-5 or Opportunity Zone funds. Sometimes they do partially funding a project, but you still might need a senior lender. So I love Ryan Holiday's book. I read it a little while back, and I believe that the way I look at obstacles, the way is you think about how could this actually serve me and not hurt me? Like how could it be on the way and not in the way? So one thing I started doing a few months ago when I knew this was a challenge is I said rather than looking at the lender as the obstacle, look at it as that's actually the way to get deals done, and really try to find those key lenders that have done out-of-the-box deals in the past, whether it be ground leases or more complex capital stacks, and try to find out what they would want. Do they want to invest in the portion that my side of the funding controls? Would they be interested in trying to do it at a level that works for them? So I definitely embodied, just take it on, like use that as like something that you could partner with somebody rather than look at them as the obstacle. And I'm in it. I'm trying to do that. I think that's the approach that works. And have seen some early successes. And, the interesting thing about, I'm sure same with retail tenants, if you just go to a big enough universe, there's probably a fit for a space for some tenant that's maybe even out of the box or maybe out of your mind. And especially in certain markets like South Florida where so many tenants are coming in from out of the area. So same in the financing space. So many different folks around the world want to invest in the U.S. commercial real estate market that it's sometimes a matter of just, expanding your horizons and maybe looking out of the usual suspects. So that's kind of one of the obstacles that I'm dealing with, and that's how I'm approaching it to make them, someone on the way and maybe somebody that's out of the box that you haven't thought of. But would love to hear anybody, any feedback that anybody might have.
Anyone have feedback for Adam? I agree. When I am faced with an obstacle, like in a space, for example, I don't want to lease this space because there's 4 handicapped parking spaces in front of it, and there's no other parking nearby, then I know I can't go talk to an ice cream store, right? I need to go find, when I'm canvassing, a tenant that has no parking spaces in front of their space, right? Then that's what you're doing, right? You're saying, instead of seeing this as an obstacle, let's find someone that it's not. Or when I sometimes I go canvassing in markets, and one time I was in Des Moines, and the leasing agent was, I can't lease space in Des Moines. What a terrible market, and it's so all complaining about Des Moines, and because she had other projects like in Chicago and like much cooler places, and I said, well, we're going to lease to people who already are in Des Moines. Right? If Des Moines is an obstacle, let's remove the obstacle, and let's go talk to people who don't see it as an obstacle because they're already embracing that which you think is an obstacle, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and just one last thing on that, and it actually led to some success. And really all it takes is just finding one tenant, in my case, one funding source. I literally just went out to a universe of 100 lenders and said, have you ever closed a deal with C-PACE in it? And sure enough, found 4 that said, oh, yeah, we did this last year with a few deals. And I said, great, let's talk. I'm one of the providers. So sometimes it really is that, is they're just expanding the universe. But one thing I know not to do, and I think you just gave that example too, is don't just keep trying to go against that same exact tenant and trying to convince them that, oh, you don't need to have that many spaces. I think that's a big takeaway that I think I hear Gary say a lot too, is, not everyone's going to be your prospect or your client, and just be able to bow out when you see early that it's just not going to line up in a way that you think there is a fit. Don't keep on, going against the current,
Right. Well, and for sure you should never make the prospect wrong. Right?
Yep.
So they say, oh, well, I need parking. Oh, no, you don't. Okay, great. The people want to buy from people they like, and that's not the way to get them to like you, by making them wrong, right?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Beth,
all right.
Justin in Knoxville. Kind of on that note, all my clients are awesome, but if anyone's ever had one that's not and doesn't see the cost in keeping a deal from happening because they are valuing the property maybe more than what the market is revealing, we don't want to say no for our landlords either. And so just by some example, I would say, how much does this cost us by having this vacancy for 9 months, 12 months? There's a real number there that it's already cost us. And that number, when you compare it to the number that we're off from making this deal, how much greater do you want that cost to rise before we finally see what the market's willing to bear?
Right.
Hey, landlord, do you remember 2009? Do you remember that deal that you said no to that you wish you would have done?
Right.
And sometimes just being honest with your clients about market expectations is what gets them to move.
Absolutely. I've made those mistakes, for sure, being a little arrogant about what I think the market can bear and finding out that it couldn't or didn't. Another statement in the book he says is, stop looking for angels and look for angles. What do you guys think that meant? Stop looking for angels and look for angles.
Stop hoping a miracle is going to happen.
Yeah. It's not going to fall from the sky. Try to figure out, look at the issue, what's going to happen, and it's not like it's going to fix itself. So find something that makes sense, that works for the benefit of whatever you're accomplishing, and approach it. And angles can go many different ways. So you go one way, if it doesn't work, you go to a different way. I mean, he kind of relates that to the Ulysses S. Grant and his story in Vicksburg. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and I think, I hope you guys have opportunities, to brainstorm with, either peers in your company or, peers in your market that aren't competitors, because I think a lot of time brainstorming on deal obstacles is a great way to come up with some creative ideas. And I'm always open, just send me an email or a text or go on social. I'm always open to talking about and trying to talk through and coming up with creative ideas to get around obstacles. I love that. And he also says, focus on the moment, not the monsters that may or may not be ahead. My mom was the biggest worrywart in the world, and my dad was not. I'm so glad I got my dad's optimism. I got my mom's work ethic. My dad was a dreamer. He always believed, the next best deal is going to be the next best deal. I lost them both years ago, and I miss them, but my mom's work ethic. But thank God I got my dad's optimism, because he's the glass half full and she was the glass half empty. And I can't tell you how many times growing up my dad would say, June, what you're worrying about is never, ever, ever going to happen. And the energy that you are, that you're using up all of the goodness in your body and your mental, state by worrying is such a waste. So, all right. I hope you guys liked that. Any other questions before we talk about next month? No? Okay. So next month is my book, and we're going to have someone interviewing me. So I think, Josie, are you on the phone? I think it's February 15th, right? I believe it's Friday, February 15th. And I hope you guys, yes, she's saying yes, 11:30. And then the book after that is Getting Things Done. That's, for those of you guys that know Aliona with Saglo in Miami, this is her Bible, and she's been asking me to do it for, I think the last 13 months. So we're going to be doing that one. And then after that is Atomic Habits. I just started listening to Atomic Habits. My entire office is crazy about this book. So I'm excited. That will be the one in, I guess, April. So we've got my book next, then Getting Things Done, and then Atomic Habits. So thank you guys for being on the call. And if we don't have any other questions, let's all go out and make some deals.